Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Enter the Matrix, where the goal of this whole thing, and I believe you, Nikolai, would agree, our goal is to share deep insights on how this matrix works through conversation and practical tips to help you all navigate life. So quickly before we get into this, I want to ask you, Nikolai, tell us a little bit about yourself because people, when I refer to you, I always say my Belarusian spiritual advisor. And people are like,
Yes, well,
what the fuck is that? Right? So let's go down that rabbit hole first. Who are you? What's your background and what started you on this path and this journey?
okay. Well, before I double click on that, a little bit more about the name of the podcast, Enter the Matrix. And Mitch, you suggested that while we were having coffee,
Yeah.
and right away it clicked. And the reason it clicked because I see there are so many people trying to escape the Matrix. All of us watched the movie The Matrix, and The Matrix is bad, and etc.
Yeah.
And here we're suggesting to do the opposite, to enter the Matrix. And as we chat here with Mitch, the goal is to unpack what actually is the Matrix and why entering the Matrix is actually what, at the end of the day, we should do rather than trying to escape it. So that's a little preview, and then we'll unpack that. My background, as you mentioned, Belarusian, born in Belarus, grew up there till 14, then moved. My parents immigrated to Canada, where I spent a bunch of time, and then I started building software companies, tech companies, and as a result, I ended up in San Francisco. Built 3 tech companies. Well, not all of them were tech, but mostly tech companies in healthcare. One of them was brick and mortar chain of cardiology clinics. So basically, I was always attracted to doing something that had meaningful impact on people's lives. And intuitively, I picked healthcare because the logic was you cannot be a happy, fulfilled person unless you have your health. So it's like a fundamental requirement. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if I can at least solve that part, then we're going to have many more happy people. And that's where I started, solving all types of healthcare issues. The first company we put radiology, cardiology in the cloud. That's back to 2004. And I was in my late teens, and I thought I'm going to lose my sleep over, some arguments with my girlfriend. But I lost my sleep over running out of hard drives in a data center because the medical images were so large and hard drives were so little back then. So I was literally sometimes sleeping in a data center. And our company was hosting 10% of all Canadian healthcare system, basically, when it comes to imaging. So whenever our data centers went down, 10% of Canadian healthcare system went down. And,
Wow.
and then that journey went on, chain of cardiology clinics, then basically tried to do stuff in preventative healthcare. And last company was quite successful while I was running it. We had top investors from San Francisco, 200 people, revenue growing insanely rapidly. And so basically I checked off everything I was given. It's like I landed in this life. I was given a checklist. Nikolai, here's a checklist of things you should do to be happy and successful in this society. And then I found myself sitting in the boardroom. So basically had a whole floor of a big building downtown Toronto. And I'm sitting in the boardroom and I'm hating my life. I'm like not enjoying, not connected with my life at all. So like I run a very successful, large, rapidly growing company. I just got married. I live between penthouses in Toronto and San Francisco. I drive a nice car. I fly. I take 8 weeks of vacation, fly wherever I want in the world, staying in the top places, but I'm miserable. So I was like, what the fuck? I've been given the checklist like a good student, which I was in the beginning. I checked the 3 days off, and I'm super unhappy. And then um, I kept suppressing that unhappiness. I was like, you just gotta keep going. You just gotta, you just gotta keep following the checklist. That's the truth. That's the deep truth. And the universe or life had different plans for me. Mid year 2019, as everything in my life was going spectacular. Like the business was growing like crazy. Investors were throwing money at us. Um, I started having panic attacks, and I'm like, what the fuck? This does not make any sense. But then I've been like leading up to that, being in healthcare. I've been biohacking for like around 10 years because my original thesis, as I've already mentioned, was if I can have this body super healthy, then I can be a top performing leader. And that was my other obsession. So by then I had a team of performance psychologists, neuropsychologists, functional medicine doctor, meditation coach, business coach, relationship counselor. So basically I thought, well, as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, I'm kind of like an Olympic athlete, and I don't have a team. So I'm supposed to have a team to perform. I gathered this team, paying them a lot of money. And rather than becoming a top performing leader, I'm in bed with panic attacks and I can't even get out of bed. And I thought, I'm like, well, I have all these instruments. I have all this knowledge. I can shake this off. So 1 week passes, second week passes, and I'm not shaking it off. And there's this clear memory. I'm like, I'll be fine. I'm just gonna walk over to a nearby supplement store and gonna buy some ashwagandha to calm myself. So I walk out. I started walking on one of the major streets in Toronto. I was like 3 lanes one direction, 3 lanes another direction, and I'm like maybe half a mile from my place. The panic attack rolls in, and for me, they were very overwhelming, where basically I lose control over my body. It's like I can't, like, stops functioning. So I sit down. There are like, I think 2 or 3 homeless people sitting on that major street. I sit down beside them and hang out with them for around an hour until the panic attacks roll through, because I can't walk back and I can't walk to the store. So I just hang out there with homeless people until it passes. Then I get up and I walk back. And that was basically my life. I couldn't even go to the office. So that forced me to take a leave of absence and rethink life. And I took some time, flew to Alps, sitting in the chalet and looking at the mountains, beautiful, in Chamonix, France. And I started, I guess, realizing more and more in what horrible state I'm in, which I wasn't paying attention to because I was hitting all the metrics of life. I was crushing all metrics of life. But my inner state was just garbage. It was just so much suppressed that I wasn't paying attention to, and it all started coming out. And that was probably one of the scariest, I'd say the scariest time in my life, when I started allowing everything that was suppressed to start coming out. While sitting in the chalet, looking at looking at Mont Blanc, stunning views, I felt horrible inside. It was like mix of fear, depression, anxiety, panic. It was just the worst cocktail of energies. And that's when things started unraveling. And I still had all these people, coaches, psychologists, all these therapist specialists helping me navigate the panic attacks. And we were making some progress. In like 3-4 months, I've learned how to manage them. They were still happening. And
how many were you having at that point?
I'd say in the
Or how
beginning, I
often?
would have sometimes multiple a day.
Oh, wow.
And the worst part was, because if you really look at a biological neurochemical level at a panic attack is just a crazy amount of adrenaline and cortisol is being produced because the body is experiencing the state of like basically it's like a state of dying. Like you think that the thought that kept running through my head is I'm dying. That's it. That's the end. So there's the crazy amount of adrenaline and cortisol trying to escape death, right? Because that's how our body's wired. Shit, if you're gonna die, how are you gonna release this? Then you gotta either, fight, flight, or freeze.
Yep.
And for me, it was freeze. And it was just, and then basically after each panic attack, it took around 2 to 3 days for the body to recover. So I would have like crazy body aches because cortisol and adrenaline had to clear out of the body. And only later I was taught a trick after experience, or if I'm experiencing panic attack or after panic attack, you just got to go do high intensity workout because you're basically showing to your body that we ran away from danger. But because my tendency would be to freeze, that means like, well, you probably should escape the danger.
Yeah.
And so to take 2 to 3 days in bed, like literally I was completely dysfunctional after every panic attack. Then as I learned to manage them, that started subsiding to a few a week. And I remember while I was in Chamonix, I was walking at night from a restaurant, and it just rolled in. And I'm just in the middle of almost in the middle of a forest. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to hang out here. And it was just like, I pause, I hang out. Then I knew how to manage them. I allowed the initial wave to roll through. And then I could unfreeze and continue with my life. Not in a pleasant way, but at least I'm not sitting under a tree in the middle of the night in the forest, or with homeless people in the middle of the city. So that's what the guys, my team taught me to do. And then I was like, well, I guess that's the best it's going to be in my life. And after the mountains, I went to see a friend in Ukraine. And while I was in Kiev, I was like, I had two options. I was like, I'll go somewhere warm, and I was thinking Spain, or I'll go Bali, and everybody keeps talking about Bali, and I was like, okay, feels good. I just get on the flight, and my friend was sitting there. It was super cold. It was like end of November in Eastern Europe. First, I thought it was just bad weather because the light was out at like 3 p.m. in November. I was like, is it like just clouds, or is that actually dark? He's like, it's actually dark. I was like, man, I'm giving you a ticket as well. We're going to Bali. And that's where I say the journey kicked into the next gear. I landed in Bali. I was introduced to this massage therapist. And I was like, okay, cool, massage won't hurt. And I was sitting in Bali. I was in a booth and sitting in a hotel and not really getting out of the hotel because I was still pretty unstable. And I like panic attack would roll in. And if you like Asian countries, you get out on the street and there's like 1,000 scooters, people walking around. There's no real sidewalk and etc.
Lots of
I was
action.
like, yeah, maybe not the most conducive environment for my state. So I get introduced to this massage therapist, and this massage therapist shows up at my hotel, and we start chatting. And he starts sharing things about how the universe works. And I'm like super curious. And to put it in perspective, Nikolai, pre that, hardcore materialist capitalist, if somebody talks to me about energy, chakras, or something like that, I'd be like, you're smoking crack cocaine. Don't even talk to me. And here I got this Ukrainian massage therapist in Bali telling me about how the universe works. And I'm like fascinated. And like 2 hours into it, I'm like, dude, are you going to give me a massage or what's going on? She's like, it's already happening. And I was like, you haven't even touched me. Like, how's it happening? She is like, don't worry about it. It's already happening. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? And he came by every third day. We had a conversation. He did some physical massage, but it wasn't a thing. That was my first experience of energetic work. So as he was sharing things with me, through the words, he was aligning my worldview, which is part of energetic work. And then he was also adjusting energy in my body. And then the physical part he did was also more energetic than physical. It was all part of this mechanism that I had no understanding of. And I didn't care. I was ready to pay any amount of money for anything to get out of this shitty state.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, I have no panic attacks. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened? I had top Western specialists who worked with me for 3 months, and I barely learned to manage them. And I have some random Ukrainian massage therapist just basically address 97% of the issue. And there's still like a little bit of lingering memory of the body of having panic attacks that needed some time to dissipate, but I was like a brand new human. And then my ex-wife flew into Bali and she's like, what the fuck? You're fine now. I was like, I know. And that's where the worldview that I spent over 30 years building through studying like biohacking, the way our society works, economy works, and etc., everything started crashing because I'm like built multiple companies in healthcare, had access to the top specialists, and none of that could help me. And this random guy completely turned my life around. And I was like, well, clearly I don't understand shit about this world and I don't understand shit about this life. And as a result, I decided to step down from the role of the CEO and transition to a chairman and continue this journey, basically flying around the world and trying all types of weird, sketchy things to see what else is out there. Also trying to understand why I have panic attacks, why this guy doing this funny things resolve the panic attacks, whereas the top specialists with top instruments that are like medically studied with thousands of medical journal publications couldn't do anything. And by the way, we were like using the most cutting edge technology, like neurofeedback and like bunch of stuff, like all the latest modalities around neurofeedback. Like, let me put it in perspective. I was flying around the world with a bunch of medical equipment and probably around 5,000 pills of different colors that were supplements. And I clearly remember this moment. I think I got stopped in Munich airport, was connecting to Munich, flying somewhere, and they scan my carry-on, and he opens the carry-on, and there is this industrial case within the carry-on. And he's like, what is this? And I was like, oh, it's for my brain. And there's like neurofeedback devices, right? But neurofeedback devices have a bunch of electrodes.
Yeah.
And I didn't have one of these hats. I had just so many wires. So I decided to organize them with electric tape. And he opens this industrial casing, and there's
Thinks
this.
you've got a bomb.
Yeah, and there's this block. And then picture is going in different directions with a lot of electric tape. And he starts freaking out. And I was like, dude, relax. I'm having issues with my head. So started explaining. So he just relaxed. Then he opens the other half of the carry-on. And of course, all these supplements, I transferred them to little Ziploc bags, like drunkard bags, because the pills were occupying too much space. So I moved them to a bunch of little bags. So he opens the other side, and there were like 5,000 pills of different colors. And his heart drops. He starts like almost screaming in German. And I was like, dude, relax. This is also for my brain. This is supplements. He goes, what? I'm like, supplements. And he's not getting it. I was like, vitamins. Then he calms down. He looks at me, and I didn't expect that from a German police officer at the airport. He goes, have you tried apples? And then I was like, okay, we're good. I'm getting through the border.
So they can't tell if you're either a terrorist or a Mexican cartel drug dealer at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically that's my background, and by flying around and meeting all types of people, I'd say my main objective was to understand at the deepest level context of where we are, meaning this planet and where we exist,
Mm-hmm.
and the context of who we are. Like, what is this body that I'm given? And who am I? Am I this body or am I this thought? And like by then, I've already been meditating quite a bit. So I was already starting to have interesting experiences that I could not explain at all. And as a result of what is that? 5-6 years of exploration and learning from different people, we teamed up with few people who I ended up meeting once again randomly, and created a group called Atman. And then we met through a friend who does all the things I touched on, all the so-called funny things, unexplainable things. And now here we are, neighbors in Montenegro.
Yeah, well, and you know what's fascinating? Because I think most people, when they start to think about, the matrix, energetic work, manifestation, all this stuff, usually it gets filtered through this, I'm just going to call it what it is, kind of like very woo-woo perspective,
Yeah.
right? And so nobody can grasp it because it's like, are these guys like on fucking mushrooms? Are they smoking? Like, what's going on, right? In what I love about you, it's like you come from the most practical, pragmatic background you could possibly have. It's like, you come from a background where, hey, it is black or it is white. It is number one or it is number two. Like, it's very binary. So, from my, my perspective and getting to know you, it makes all the information land for me because, it's like, fuck, okay, you're distilling it in ways that I think most people can start to grasp these concepts and understand it, rather than it being so up in the clouds that it's now either,
What's the word? I'm a hengst.
yeah, and it's and you can't understand it, and therefore you can't even get on board with it because it's like it's such a foreign concept, and nobody is kind of distilling it down to like, well, okay, what is it really? Because even if we kind of look at all sorts of things, usually the greater understanding you have of something, the easier you are able to explain it to somebody.
Well, and it's interesting you bring this up, because that's literally how I felt before I decided to go down this rabbit hole. I was like, wow, all these people are fucking crazy. It was like, I don't know what I'm doing among these crazy people. And the funny thing is, because I had access to the top instruments or modalities to help me navigate panic attacks and a bunch of other stuff I've been experiencing, and they were not working, I was left with no options. So that was the first thing that had to break. And then I ended up in an interesting position. And I think it's more natural for entrepreneurs. It's like, okay, I'm going into unknown. I don't know how to solve this problem. The only thing that matters, if I can get results, I will try anything and everything, like at a guy singing frog sounds while dancing around fire, while jumping on her left leg, I don't care. I will try anything and everything. If it gives me results, then I'll double click and I'll try to understand. I'll start studying it and I'll try to understand it. And that's literally was my journey, because a lot of people around me were like, wow, this is crazy. And I was like, Nikolai, completely lost. And I was like, well, I don't care. I was like, if I can get results, and ultimately, number one, I wanted to fully get out of like panic attacks, but like that guy helped me in Bali and it was like mostly resolved. But then I realized how depressed and tired and burned out I was. That was the next thing to solve. So I was like, ultimately, the key metric, the reason I was building all these companies and I was doing all that stuff was to be happy. And then I was like, okay, now I get my metric. I want to be happy. So I started measuring myself. Am I getting happier? And I'm okay to try all this crazy stuff. And some was completely nuts and crazy in their own work, and some had helped me like have these major shifts that took me to a completely new states of being and experiencing life. And I started discovering myself being happier and happier than I have been in while I had all the check marks on that checklist that I was going to. So that was basically, it's like, does it deliver results? Yes or no? If it delivers results, let's double click on that, understand it. And then an interesting thing unfolded. Few friends of mine were like, well, we want to experience all this crazy stuff too. By then it started becoming cool because in like Silicon Valley, was just like starting to become like, first everybody was measuring who has the best therapist. Then therapists stopped being or coach. Then that stopped being cool, and then ayahuasca started being cool. And then people started becoming more interested in psychedelics. And then they were like, well, you're doing all types of weird stuff. We'd like to experience some of that as well. And a dear friend of mine kept asking, he was like, hey, he was like, I don't want to figure out all this stuff. I'm like running a big business, and I don't want to be flying around the world and figuring out, some crazy woo-woo that delivers zero impact to a thing that looks like even crazier woo-woo, but delivers results. So why don't you create something for me? And first I was like, I'm taking a sabbatical. I'm figuring out my own life. And then the matrix or the worlds through this friend kept talking to me. And probably by a third time, I was like, okay, let's do it. And that was the creation of this organization that we call Atman, where we started basically vetting all these unexplainable modalities, or at that time unexplainable, and vetting them and making them easily accessible to people who don't have time to figure all this stuff out. And that was the first version of that organization. It was like, let's call it a high-end vetted buffet of spiritual modalities. And then we started realizing that was cool, and people were having all these experiences. But as I observed it, the impact was probably 5 to 20%. Intuitively, I felt like we're not getting full results from all these modalities. And the insight I had is that we needed to have a vector for the programs we create. So in the beginning, programs were unstructured. It's like, we're going to throw everything at you and hopefully something works.
Yeah, see what happens, see what sticks.
Exactly. And that's basically the first version of approach that I had as well. And at least I nailed it down to modalities that worked for me, right? Then I started learning, wow, like not all modalities fit for everyone. And it depends on let's call it a vector for that human is. So where are they going? Where are they right now and where they're going? So we needed some kind of GPS or direction. And that's when I started getting like really digging into understanding, how do I understand human's vector? It's because like we talk about it, everybody's unique, everybody has their passion and purpose, and everyone is different. So it's like, okay, so if we can understand that part, then we can merge GPS with the different modalities and have much greater output or impact. And that's when we started using some early tools, and we had like kind of broad understanding of factors for everyone. And we started seeing improvement and results. We went probably from around 5 to 20 to, let's call it 20 to 50%. So same modalities had different impact, because now you have a grander structure that is actually guiding you in some kind of direction, rather than coming in to buffet with no like understanding what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to build muscle, gain weight, or whatever, and just eating everything,
Yeah.
So now you have a plan. Okay, have some shrimp, have some salads and some fats, and have a cake at the end. And then, but that wasn't good enough. Like I felt like we're making progress. And then finally the world connected me with who my business partner is, Maxime, who you've met. And him and his wife spent, I don't know, 10, 15 years trying to solve specifically that problem of understanding the vectors, how to understand the individual vectors for every human, but also they've also solved bigger problem, understanding what is actually going on here, and the context that we exist in. And then, of course, that the individual vectors is our individual context, right? So what is the vector for this whole planet and existence, and what is the vector for the human? And that's when things really clicked into the next gear, and we started seeing spectacular results. We went from like 20 to 50% to like 70 to 100% impact. I'd say first it would be 50 to 100% impact. Then we needed to distill exactly what you mentioned. We needed to distill the lingo, the delivery, make it understandable, make it relatable. So in the beginning, it was 50, 70. And then once we've, let's call it, transformed and translated it for much easier consumption for a modern day mind, the results started going to 70, 100%. And that's where we sit now. And like the system got developed, the so-called Atman alignment course. And from course, we have a whole bunch of individual modules. And it became, I'd say, if we use entrepreneur words, things became more productized, more polished. At the same time, also became substantially more affordable, because as we started, it was like very expensive for people who could really afford it, and etc. And every step we make forward, things become more productized, more accessible. As an example, we'll be launching this book that will be very affordable, based on which one of our main programs is made. Person can just buy it and read it. It's an intense text, because it has so much deep structured wisdom that people can get a lot out of it, and you can reread it and getting a new insight every time. That's what happens with me. And that's from there, we have the course where we make it more digestible and individualized, and spend a lot of time in Q&A and etc. So
Yeah,
I'll
well,
pause.
in terms of vectors, ballpark, like how many would you say that there are now, or that you've sort of discovered or seen?
So why don't we start with where we started this episode, matrix, because to understand the vectors, we need to understand where we are and what's going on. So this planet is everything. The whole universe operates as matrix. What definition of matrix is just a set of algorithms that manage interactions of anything and everything and everyone in a specific area of the universe. That's matrix. So there is universal matrix that manages interactions of all the stars, planets, galaxies, systems, and etc. So it's just a set of algorithms. So it's an operating system. It's like Windows or Mac OS. So zooming in here, this planet is a live being that has its own operating system or matrix. And that's where the misunderstanding is. People are trying to fight the system that is trying to help them. It's just an operating system so that shit does not implode here. Because if you don't have the rules of engagement, then everything will break. And if we double click on those rules, so for example, when we take different chemicals and we put them in one tube, they react in a specific way. That's an algorithm of interaction of different chemical elements. That's part of matrix. That's just algorithm. Then we have different ecosystems, like crocodiles eat the specific type of animals, and that's how they survive. Those animals eat the other stuff, and etc. So that's part of matrix. Then we have our social matrix. How does Nikolai interact with Mitch? How does he interact with his parents, the society, and etc. So all these are just different parts of an operating system, and that's what the matrix is. And if we look at this, I guess original version of this of these bodies, so-called monkeys, flying on a piece of rocks through vast space. Um, this planet has vectors, and originally monkeys, or what were humanoids, uh, they were selected as a species to hold consciousness. That is basically what makes this body unique. We basically got a connection to a Wi-Fi with God, and a God is a big word, and it got, I think, um, defined in so many ways from religion to other places. So we call it primary consciousness. And if we really look even at the science of what has unfolded, the explanation of the existence of this universe, there was some kind of a Big Bang event where there was an explosion and the universe started expanding. So in other terms, there was energy that started expanding from a point of singularity, and that energy is God, or we call it also source, we call it primary consciousness. It's a thought. And if we really look at it from a scientific standpoint of view, it's just energy. It's just wave of energy, which is light or sound or etc. So it started expanding to experience, to structure things around, because by structuring things around, it can have more experiences, more diversity, and it can get bigger. And the bigger it gets, the more experiences it can have, the more diversity it can have. And so it's in this state of expansion. And this light, or the energy that is expanding, makes up everything. So it's like one thing I clearly remember from some kind of scientific study where they basically said if you remove all the space between electrons and the protons in this body, then everything will fit into this super invisible amount of space, the tiniest amount of space. Because ultimately, us as beings, we think we're these physical beings, but at the end of the day, we're just a dense energy. And the concept of touch is just gravitational resistance. So that the more you start double clicking in all the science and etc., the more it becomes apparent and clear that everything is energy. Okay, so we have this original energy that is primary consciousness, absolute God, the source. It's expanding, and we are part of this expansion. We're just a specific sector in this large, vast amount of space. And its intention, because everything is fractal in this universe, and it's expressed, the fractal concept is expressed everywhere. Like you plant the seed of a tree, and the seed, there is information about the whole tree, the branches, the leaves, and etc. So everything is everything is a component of the system itself. So that's why.
Yeah, it's almost holographic from that perspective, in a sense.
Yeah, and holographic is another very important term that we can look at. That becomes a more technical part of understanding how this, let's call it game that we're playing, works. Because at the end of the day, it is a hologram, and there's a bunch of data studies, declassified Stargate project from CIA, all the intelligence agencies, KGB, CIA, everybody studied this inside out. There's a great article somewhere on Vice about this whole world being a hologram. That's, let's call it a technical description. What is in the computer? There's a hard drive, memory, blah blah blah, and how it projects the image, right? If we come back to the vector, so the grand vector of this energy is to expand and structure the space that it's expanding to, so that it could exist. Because if it doesn't get structured, then there is a low chance of all the expressions of this absolute could coexist. Like, imagine there was no algorithm of how oxygen reacts with hydrogen. We would never have water, you know? So this light, or this energy that comes from a point of singularity that is expanding, is already carrying the rules of engagement, or the algorithms. So anywhere it gets, it imposes the rules of how that environment should be structured, so that it can harmoniously exist and continue expanding rather than collapsing because everybody just starts killing each other, and the water falls apart because now oxygen doesn't stick to hydrogen, and etc. So that's one grand vector. For this planet, the vector is, it has been this planet, the matrix of this planet, we call it as one of the most advanced evolutionary schools. So the operating system that is running on this planet was designed to teach carriers of consciousness from grade 1 to PhD of how to harmoniously interact with other carriers of consciousness and the rest of the world and the universe. So we're basically in a school, and that's why it's a bit of an unpleasant. A lot of us have unpleasant memories of schools where we're forced to do things, and if we don't do them, we get bad marks or we get smacked by a teacher. If you're in Eastern European school, and so we're literally in school. So that's why everything in this environment, every human, every event, every part of expression of this environment, always trying to teach us something, so that we become primary conscious like. Because what happened is that when this being, this body, became a carrier of consciousness, the energy of absolute or primary consciousness or the source connected to this body. So we became a direct fractal of God in this sector of universe. And through this body, God, absolute primary consciousness, is structuring this part of universe to bring it to harmony. So, but for us to truly connect with this energy that comes from a point of singularity, we have to gain inner harmony. And given that originally that was just an animal with the instincts of survival, find a banana, eat a banana, beat up the other animal that is trying to eat my banana, right? We had some journey to go through. And there are other factors at play why we still have a bunch of inharmonies. Now the planet, so the vector for the planet is also, our galaxy and planet is also moving through the universe. And we have already entered a higher vibrational space of universe, which means is that high and low vibration. So high vibration means you're closer to the core, to the center, to point of singularity. That means you're more absolute like. You're closer to harmony, to state of harmony and order. So as the planet is traveling in the whole solar system galaxy, traveling through space, we've entered the higher vibrational space. That means the planet has to adjust, meaning now it's vibrating a higher energy. That means the carriers of consciousness have to also adjust. And it's a two-way process. Part of the reason the planet entered high vibrational space is because we're also, through Wi-Fi being connected to the absolute, bringing higher vibrational energy here. So that means the planet can enter that space, but also planet has its own vector. So it also wants to enter there. So what's happening now is we have to basically learn how to achieve this inner state of harmony. In other words, what we call happiness or joy. And in Slavic language, joy is radost. Ra is same as in English, is light, energy. Dost is sufficient. So we have to achieve the state where there is sufficient amount of light or energy is within us. So that's why what we're observing, what's unfolding right now on the planet, where it seems like everybody just lost it and everything is just going crazy. Like previously, the news cycle was once a year, there was a big event, then we discussed it for 3 months, then everybody forgot about it until next big event. Yeah. Then it became like we had one big event a month and everybody discussed it for a week, then everybody forgot about it. Now we have one big event every day and you're not even sure what to react to. And that's that example of us entering high vibration space, everything that is low vibration. And to make it practical, this body carries bunch of memories. An example of vibrational energy is low vibrational or so-called negative emotions. Anger, guilt, pride, the list goes on. So all that has to come to the surface because it's in a way of achieving inner harmony. So that's why we see, for example, depression, panic attacks, suicides, everything, all the metrics going through the roof, because all that is being pushed to the surface, but most of people don't have the instruments to deal with it. Same as what unfolded with me. It was just basically me in awakening per se. And I started having all these feelings, overwhelming feelings that turned into panic attacks and et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't have the instruments. And then I used all the best instruments at my disposal and they didn't work. And that's how we get to the point we are here now talking about this. And because this experience is unfolding on an individual level for many people on this planet, we're seeing all these irrational, but of course, fully rational behaviors among our political leaders, business leaders, the stuff that's happening in the news and etc. So is it just happening at the scale of the whole planet? And we basically have front row seats, get some popcorn, and the stuff will just only continue getting more intense in one way, but ultimately it's leading in a great direction. But in a moment, unless we're willing to accept this path, open up and work on ourselves, it will be very unpleasant experience for those people.
Well, this brings me to my next sort of question, because you sort of started to touch on this, but I'd like to go into a little bit deeper. Like, if we're looking like big picture perspective, because you have people all the time, they talk about, what is the purpose of life? What is this all about? And so if we sort of unpack that, like, what is this journey all about for people?
So one simple phrase: joy or happiness. And I'm going to unpack this because everybody's like, yeah, whatever, everybody's trying to. And it's so important to clarify here. Joy and happiness are very different from pleasure. Pleasure is a very short-term state that is impossible to maintain for extensive period of time. And pleasure is only experienced by one carrier of consciousness. When one experiences pleasure, it's not true that the other people around or involved are experiencing pleasure. Whereas joy or happiness, when experienced by a carrier of consciousness, usually spreads and have other people around experience the same state. It's like walking into a coffee shop and you see somebody's truly experiencing that state of happiness, not transient like pleasure, like you light up as well. That energy gets shared. And so that is the key metric, but it has so many other important layers or aspects of it that make that up. So ultimately, we are trying to bring this pure, highly structured energy from the center of the universe, which is absolute or the source, through this body to this sector of the universe. And by doing so, we're structuring ourselves, becoming more harmonious. And guess what? As a result, we're structuring our surrounding, making the surrounding more harmonious. So to experience this joy and sustainable joy and happiness, we got to be able to achieve this inner harmony. But to achieve this inner harmony, we have a purpose here on this planet. We have to do something. And that's where everybody has different purpose. So when we create something that is aligned with grander vectors, so vectors of the planet, vector of the universe, and etc., and aligned with our capabilities and our vectors, what we do, we put in that joy and happiness into that creation. And creation is where we truly experience joy and happiness. And we've seen, many of us seen friends or experienced it ourselves if we're aligned, when we do things that are useful for others, so bring joy and happiness to others, we get energized. We don't get tired from that. And a real example for me, when I was running the last company, would spend 10 to 12 hours a day at the office. I will walk in at 9 p.m. to my place, and I would be drained. Like, I couldn't even take off the shoes. That's how drained. Like, the only thought I had, I just want to die. I don't want to live life like this. This just sucks. And then I would sit down at the computer, and I had this constant inkling inside me for years to figure out how to unlock humans' full potential. And I would start researching. At that point in time, it was biohacking, then mental health, then it was consciousness, blah, blah, blah. But at that specific point in time, I think I was researching neurochemical reactions, right? And mental health. And I checked the watch, and I'm like, it's 2 a.m. and I'm fully energized. And it did not make any sense to me. I was like, how does it make any sense? I just spent 12 hours at the office. I'm drained. I have no energy. And I continue doing work.
Yeah.
And I should be even more drained, but I'm fully energized. I don't even need to sleep. So this is an example of me intuitively aligning with my purpose here of figuring out how to unlock full human potential. When I align with that, what happens is the energy starts flowing to this body. And a great analogy is there are three core structures to this being. One is the mind that manages the physical body, which altogether we call avatar. Mm-hmm. Then there is soul, which is a religious term, but for the purpose of this conversation, let's ignore the religious connotation to that. What soul is literally a unique cocktail of energies. There's basically, same as you have Negroni in the bar, you mix different ingredients. Soul is just energy with its own unique mix of energies. That's it. And then there is spirit that also has religious connotation and got somewhat mismarketed and misunderstood. Spirit is basically also God or the source or just primary consciousness. It's the closest you can get to the point of singularity, the highest, the brightest, the most intense, the highly structured energy. That's the spirit. So on this planet, and just at the universal scale, and we will specifically talk about this planet, the way this triad of spirit, soul, and mind work, and mind, when I say mind, it includes the body as well. The spirit is the investor. It has energy. It's trying to spread this energy to structure the universe to expand, right? The soul is the founder or the CEO that is going around and saying, I need some capital or energy because I'm going to create this valuable thing for people or for carriers of consciousness, wherever you are in the universe, right? And then the mind and the body is kind of like a COO, and they're the ones that doing the work in this sector of the universe. So basically, if the mind and the body does not align with the pitch that the soul made to spirit, then there's no energy. Then you're exhausted. Then you're tired. You want to die because the soul is not sending energy through from the spirit. The soul is sitting there and is like, okay, this energy, but this avatar is completely fucking dumb. He gets joy from playing music or being a banker or whatever, but parents told him to be a doctor. And that person is just grinding to be a doctor. And it works for the first part of period of life because the way the energy is released to the body is the same as in a venture world. You get a seed round. So you have a first round of capital for your first part of life. If you can figure out and align yourself with your first glimpses of purpose or first vectors, then we'll give you the second round. We'll give you Series A. And then we'll give you Series B. And then ultimately you get access to infinite amount of money, energy, because you started making energy or money, because your product is desired, you're selling it, everybody wants to buy it, and etc. And what it means, if we come back to the purpose, if you're creating something for the world that helps other people and aligned with where the planet is moving, which we've discussed, which is increasing in vibration, developing inner harmony, and etc. And you're doing it in alignment with your cocktail of energy, with your skill set. So you're not doing it the way somebody else would do it. So as an example, let's say somebody is born and they have a predisposition to teach. And they're like, okay, and I like cooking. Okay, I'll teach the cooking classes because I enjoy both. I get joy. This is an indication of alignment. So they start teaching in the beginning cooking classes, which help people create food that is good for their body. Okay, great, in alignment. As they progress through life, then that vector becomes more multidimensional. Then they're like, well, that's becoming a business, but the soul also wants to develop that soul expressing the talents or energies that it already mastered. So basically, soul entered the body and it had predisposition to cook and it had predisposition to teach. That's like the energies that the soul has already nailed. So the first step of that creativity that we express in the world should be easy. And we have distortion in our society that we should be selling what's hard for us, because we think if it's hard for us, then it's hard for others, then people will pay. That has to go. It has to flip. What's easy and joyful. That is exactly what the universe will give us energy back for, in a form of joy, but also in a form of money. People will pay for that because people will feel the food that this person or the course that this person created for teaching people how to cook comes from this place of joy. There is happiness there. People want to buy that because just watching that course makes them happy, because happiness is shared or joy is shared. And now they make food loaded with this joy, right? Then soul, of course, wants to develop new understanding of different types of other types of energy. In this example, this, let's go say, course starts expanding and it becomes a business. More and more people buying it. But this person never managed to let people, and that the soul does not understand that type of energy leading people. And that's where the soul starts developing that. And that becomes as part of the vector for that person. And the key thing there is in that when we're developing new qualities, we experience this state of discomfort. So I mentioned that we should be following what joyful and happy. That's the true metric. That's how to align yourself. But when anything expands, it goes through discomfort. So we should not confuse the discomfort of expansion and the signals when it's not suffering and when something is not ours. If I'm meant to, let's say, teach this course about cooking, but I'm sitting on a Wall Street and trading stocks, that's suffering. That's misaligned. There's no energy there. But now, as I learn how to manage people, that's a discomfort because I'm expanding. And as we expand, the big thing about that flavor of discomfort versus suffering is that we intuitively feel we need to go there. And when we go through that part, then we have even more amount of joy goes through us because we've expanded. So I'll pause here.
Yeah. I was just about to say, like, how does someone ascertain, is this, am I just pushing against a wall that's immovable and is the wrong direction, versus I'm going through, a tough period, but this is actually the right path that I need to go, or is actually aligned with what I'm supposed to be doing, and how they can sort of sense the flavor. Yeah.
So if somebody is pushing through a hard period, that's already an indication of misalignment in many parts of life. Because when a person is aligned, and the experiences of expansion they would experience are intermittent rather than overwhelming and become the main theme of life. So me in that scenario was panic attacks, completely misaligned. And now that I've shared the explanation of the universal venture capital of energy, what was happening, the soul completely shut down energy from my avatar because I was not going in the right direction. So it's like, wow, this startup is shit. They said they're gonna produce cooking classes and scale that, and it's gonna be Netflix of cooking classes. And the guy is I don't know, growing weed or making flip flops. Completely not what we signed up for, you know. And
Yeah.
clearly, it's not his specialty, so he's not even doing it well. So why would we continue funding this startup? So the soul started shutting down the energy, and I just experienced the panic attacks because there's insane lack of energy. This body is alive not because of the food it eats. That's just a small ingredient. It's alive because of the connection of consciousness and the energy that travels through this body. And by the way, now there's so many devices that can take picture of all the energetic bodies. It's all studied. Like if you double click on this topic, it's all scientifically proven and etc. So basically, I was so misaligned that there was no Series A, and I've used up my seed round. And only when I started getting realigned, the tap of energy started opening up. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize I can enjoy life that much. And so basically, if there is overwhelming discomfort in life, that means there are a bunch of things that need to be aligned. And the fastest way out is to iterate, to become your own scientist or experimenter, meaning, okay, I'm going to try. Clearly, this path is not making me happy. I'm not receiving joy. I'm going to start tweaking things in different parts of life and see what works. And you want to measure for joy. And the key thing, not to get stuck, because the tendency of a mind is to pick a path and just ram through that wall until the completion versus,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to try this. It's not going to work, or this did not work. And I feel like suffering and it's just not happening. I'm going to back off. I'm going to come up with another method and try something else. And then that's how person develops the sensitivity and calibrates the inner instruments to sense where the joy is. And then it becomes very easy. I was like, oh, okay, I shouldn't even try this because I sense there is tension there. And our body, physical body, has direct connection to our soul. That means our body feels what the soul is trying to do here on this planet. Hence, it feels where the energy is because it's going to give out the energy. Whereas what we were taught to suppress all the bodily senses and feelings and be focused on our mind. The whole society was built on that pillar. You get rewarded by marks if you think a lot and you think hard. Then you get rewarded for the stuff you produce for your mind, blah, blah, blah. But mind, the issue is mind. The issue is the COO. COO has to execute on a plan of the CEO, but we lost the connection with that part of us, the soul, and hence COO is trying to operate the business that they don't even know what they're operating. Because imagine CEO lives in San Francisco and CEO lives in Toronto, and there's no way, there's no Zoom and there's no phone. That's what's happening for most of the people right now because they started ignoring the senses. So CEO was like, well, last time CEO told us we're gonna produce flip flops. I'm just gonna scale flip flops. Or I haven't heard it from CEO in 5 years, and I watched a great movie where somebody succeeded, starting a furniture business like IKEA. You know what? I'm gonna copy them, and I'm gonna start a furniture business too. And that's the issue with the mind. Mind has only the perspective of what it has seen and experienced in the context of a single life, this incarnation. So, and that's where things start getting going in very funny places. And as soon as we start reconnecting, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, just touching on that, and I think this is a good place to close this out. So if we look, and it's, I would imagine in some ways it's got a flavor of it in the East, but if we just look at Western culture, right? Like, what is Western culture fundamentally like? You know, work harder. Like whenever something happens, like you got to work harder. You got to,
Push
it's like,
through.
what do we say? Grind it out, push
Yeah.
through, keep going. There's that, like, no pain, no gain. Like these are really, I would say, it's almost baked into what Western culture has become. Like you got to get the money, you got to get the power, you get the women. I mean, it's like Scarface, right? So, so looking at that, like what are we supposed to be heading for, or what are the markers of that point? Like what is our compass? If the compass is not any of these things, so what is it?
Simple thing: joy or happiness. And that's the key metric. If anybody would walk away with anything in this video, is to start using the measuring tape of joy and happiness in anything you do, because the money will follow. And the reason this is becoming even more critical, because the previous version of Matrix right now, and we'll talk maybe in some other episode, there are different versions of Matrix. As the current version is version 5. As of March 1st, 2025, Matrix 6 has installed on the planet, and it's unpacking, and it's had completely it's built on top of Matrix 5, so nothing that's in Matrix 5 is going away, but the functionality is expanding. But to transition to Matrix 6, we gotta develop this inner harmony. We need to develop the inner instruments to become happy and harmonious within, because only from that place we can create things that will bring harmony to others. And if you observe, because everything is fractal, right now a lot of things are created on this planet, but look, like most of the new technologies, wow, great application in military. This is like one of the first direction of any invention, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna compete and kill others so that we have more resources. That's because we have all types of inharmonious energies. So either people want it or not, the planet and the current state of affairs will push them to find that inner harmony. And the metric is joy. So that's what we want to start measuring. So previously, in the fifth version of the Matrix, you could get away without fully aligning with happiness for times. But that period is over. Now it's like, let's put it this way. There was a lot of leeway of screwing up and whatever. Now the bumper road got much more narrow. And it's like, you either figure out how to become happy from what you do and what you create for the world, or per evolution, maybe as a species, you should not continue. And because you cannot align with the major vectors and the things that are unfolding. And as we figure that out, the Matrix will provide everything, will provide comfort, wealth, and etc. But the key thing there is it will provide the comfort and the wealth according to reasonable sufficiency. Meaning, if somebody's, let's say, soul came in here to grow carrots and sell carrots, that person will grow carrots, sell carrots, will live in a nice house, will be comfortable, will have food, enough resources for children, bring in children, everything. But might not have a 50-meter yacht and a private jet, because those are not useful instruments to carry out that mission. With that said, if that grow of carrots become multinational grow of carrots, like somebody I know was growing sunflower seeds and become indirectly, I should say, became a Russian oligarch of sunflower seeds and sunflower oil, with yacht and private jet and private island and etc., right? So that's the key thing to understand. The more positive impact we have on the world, and in that scenario is food, and we can argue forever if seed oil is bad and etc. Maybe not the topic, but the instruments can expand, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be proportional to what the person is doing. So if the person has figured out how to create value and true positive impact, harmonious impact on the world, then the matrix wants to give that person even more resources to scale it. So that person brings that harmony to more places in the world, and different types of tools show up. But what happened is that everybody has Instagram and watches Hollywood and etc. And everybody's like, I gotta have a private jet. Now flying business class is shit. Flying commercial is horrible. And now that becomes a program in mind that starts driving person in the wrong direction. Rather than focusing on joy, what else can I do with my product to deliver more value, more joy to people that use the product? The person starts obsessing with money because there is misaligned goal that is not even this person's goal, right? So that's why we keep coming back to joy. And when we do things from joy, we will be very comfortable, we will be happy, we will be healthy, and etc. And of course, there's a lot of nuance around that, but that's the core rule of how this matrix on this planet works at this point in time.
Wow. All right. So joy, happiness, and reasonable sufficiency.
Yeah, and use those instruments to test. Like basically, you're doing something. Is it giving me happiness or joy? Or another way to word it, does it energize me? Because it's the same.
Yeah.
Joy and happiness is just energy. It's just energy flowing through the body. So if you're aligned, there is more energy flow. So if you did something and you're coming out of that exhausted, probably not something you should be doing. Okay. Then the question becomes, how else do I do? Do I do this? Or what else do I do it? Because there is vector and there is hub. So, and the first priority, of course, to align with the vector. Are we moving in the right direction generally? That's key. And then there is the world. The matrix is trying to give us the easiest way to walk this path. But because we're fucking smart and we know what's best, we start deciding how and where. So it's like, let's put it this way. Mind is a calculator that is trying to solve a quantum problem. We have a whole quantum computer, which is our soul, spirit, and the whole matrix that is working to support us and give us the easiest, the most joyful path through life. But we're like, we have a fucking calculator. We know how to solve this better. And that's where the ego kicks in, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm gonna,
I know what's right. I know.
I'm gonna buy a bunch of Instagram ads, and that's how I'm gonna sell my carrots. And try to register Instagram account and get blocked, right? And I was like, oh, maybe I should just go to farmer market. You go to farmer market and everything aligns. And this is an example. When things align, it just flow. You show up and there is an extra spot in a farmer market. You start selling carrots there. You're like, wow, that was easy. And people are buying it. Wow. And you're selling it there. Then the buyer from a grocery store shows up. And you've been trying to email them and do billboards and nobody responds. No, it was just not the time. You haven't perfected your carrots, and then the buyer shows up. Can we do more carrots? Your carrots are spectacular, and I was like, wow, that was easy. And the funniest thing, if everyone just sits back and traces all the major events in their life, they do not follow logic. They're irrational. It's because they aligned with something, and out of nowhere, somebody called them and said, "Hey, why don't you go come Prime TV?" And a lot of people now can whistle their way onto Prime TV, but guess what? That usually gives no results. So it's like, look, I've been on whatever, it's like CNN, Fox News, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And usually that drives no results because that wasn't aligned. They forced it. They were like, emailed 700 people, and one contact told them, okay, we'll sign you up. And months later, they finally, the topic of carrots come up, and you end up there. But natural is somebody calls you and you go do it, and it gives you that expansion, further expansion. So that's when we know we're aligned, when things are flowing. And here's the difference. Things are flowing, but internally we could feel discomfort because it's forcing us to expand. So discomfort is okay because we need to learn to overcome the discomfort and to learn new things. But if the discomfort comes from outside, then we either not aligned, or the matrix is trying to show us that we're not learning the lessons that are already inside. So it's like we're not getting the message. It's like, hey, like chill out and do this and everything will be okay. And if we're not getting that message, then the external environment becomes harsher and harsher. So it stops us in the tracks, so that we can revisit and be like, well, maybe I don't need that Instagram account. I'm going to stop forcing it. What else is possible? I was like, oh, that, okay. You go farmer's market the first time, it's a little bit, wow, I've never done this. Well, I'm not even a businessman, And there is this internal discomfort because you've never done it. How do people are they gonna like my carrots? Are they gonna buy them? I'm just gonna sit there with 10,000 carrots and like bring them back, right? And that's the nuance that we want to learn to start distilling. We want to go into that inner discomfort to learn, expand, evolve, but we don't want to force things in external world, because usually it's a sign we're going in the wrong direction or using wrong methods when there is an easier way of getting there.
Yeah, and if you really want to force your way through the matrix, you end up with a broken arm in 6 pieces. So, which we'll go into next time, because that's a little interesting aside there where the matrix kicked my ass, and we talked about that when that all went down, and that was a shit show unto itself. But here we are in Montenegro, so
there we are.
All right, well, that's a lot for the first episode here. Any sort of parting, parting wisdom or sort of takes that you want the audience to take away from this from today?
Key thing is to practice. Anything you learn is practice, because if we don't apply the knowledge, then it's not integrated. It's not useful. So then the simplest practice here is to really start pausing in life and do the inventory of what makes you happy and what takes energy and what gives energy. And the second part, start connecting with the body. And as a result, there are now many modalities to reconnect with the body: yoga, meditation, and etc. When we start feeling our body again, we start getting the signals from the CEO, from the soul. What it means is, if we're planning to do something, the way we can recognize if it's aligned or not, we can just visualize or think of that thing. And if we feel tension in our stomach, that means it's not the thing. If we feel lightness and expansion, like the muscles relax in the stomach, because stomach is the most sensitive muscle. Like it's like we are tense or we're relaxed, right? And if it gets relaxed and expands, that's a sign that you're going in the right direction. So there's so many simple tools. There's also, what's the guy's name? Hawkins, that created muscle test. Same concept. So pick your flavor, but practice. And to me, the easiest practice could be just through trial and error. You try something and it takes a lot of energy. You're exhausted. Pause. Stop forcing it. Think what else or how else you can do it. That's it. And once as I started seeing that pattern, that when I'm studying the unlocking full human potential, I get a lot of energy. I was like, well, clearly I'm supposed to be doing something about it. And I've been already trying to do it, but I got derailed. And by the way, the last company, the intention was that I wanted to focus on preventive health to help people to unlock their full potential. But the money was in dentistry, and we ended up in dentistry, and we were printing cash. It's literally, that's in what they say is selling soul is. I lived that. I sold my soul. My soul wanted to do something else and be happy, but I was with a checklist. I had to be successful, and that's where the money was. And I followed the money and was materially very successful, but completely the opposite on the inside. And the beauty is that when we align those, both will be given. I thought I needed to do this or to be someone else to be successful. And now the matrix adjusted me and I'm coming back and etc. And now basically I want to look. And the funny thing, even in the company, when I was building the company, intuitively, I was like, I'm really not enjoying the vector of this company because I don't care about dentistry. Okay, I have a good smile and that's fine.
Yeah,
Every day it'd be like, oh, how do I improve the smile of every human on this planet? Not was not my dream, you know? But intuitively, what started happening, I hired a bunch of top specialists to unlock full human potential of every employee in the company. We had a coach who flew in to teach transcendental meditation, who also taught Ray Dalio and Bridgewater team and etc. He would fly in, and the first 50 employees were trained on transcendental meditation. We had boardroom booked off during specific hours where anybody could walk in and just meditate together. Then we had a performance coach who only worked with top executives in San Francisco, accessible to any employee on the team. Like you could be a technical support person and book a session with this person. That what excited me in the company the most. But I wasn't fully connected the dots only later. And the only reason that the matrix still allowed me to take the company that far, because it started becoming big and successful company, is because I was running the sidetrack and using part of the budget to unlock human potential. And then as I started seeing the pattern, I'm like, okay, I can just relax and just start focusing on that. I don't need to impress anyone. I'm just going to do what gives me energy. So practice. The key thing is practice. If I would summarize, take the knowledge, apply it in real life, and you'll see how the life changes.
excellent. Well, I think next time I definitely want to dive into some of those modalities. I want to go into history. I want to go into different perspectives and cultures. I got a lot of stuff for you. So, yeah. So stay tuned, everybody, because we're going to enter the matrix one way or the other.
We're in the matrix, so we're just going to learn how to operate it. And yeah, might as well consciously enter it or start interacting with it consciously. Awesome, Mitch.
All right, Nikolai. Well, we will tune in next episode. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Thanks. Chat soon.